All right, so we've got our gun sight. In this video, we're going to take a look at actually firing projectiles. And as before, like we did with our Scorpion, we're going to keep this simple to begin with, and then we'll make a nicer projectile later on. So for now, we're just going to reuse the same green ball that the enemy is firing at us. And so that's simple and easy to work with. And we'll watch that real quick just so that we remember. And I think while we're waiting... Oh, here he comes. I'm just impatient. I was going to say, we'll go ahead and rename this image to Crosshair. And there's our green projectile being fired at us. So we're just going to reuse that. It's just literally just a green sphere with a very simple green texture on it. So let's rename this real quick to Crosshair, just because it seems like the right thing to do. And now let's switch back out of 2D mode. I'm still in 2D mode from the last video when we put our gun sight in. So let me switch to 2D mode and let's focus again our efforts on our tower. So I'll press F and zoom in on it. And just like we did on the Scorpion, let's add an empty game object. And I have parented this to the turret part, the tower rocket launcher part of this. If you noticed, I right-clicked there to create it. When I do that, it's going to put a nice predictable place. Usually, it will put it right in the middle of that game object, which is what you want. If you just select one, it might put it who knows where. Probably at 0, 0, which would mean you would have to move the point around a lot, and that would take extra time. So let's just do it the easy way. So this here, I'm going to move it. I'm going to turn perspective off so that I can actually have a shot at lining this up without messing it up too much. And then I'm got it from the back and make sure that it looks good here. I might actually even line it up so that it matches that gun port. That might be pretty good. All right, so just look at it from a couple of different angles, make sure that it's in a good place, and save it. And now we need to change this from game object to, what do we call it on the other one? We should call it the same thing. So let's go look in our project real quick, and let's see where we've got our bad guy prefab. Oh, we don't have him as a prefab yet. We haven't made it that far along. So let's find our enemy PA warrior. Here he is. And what do we call it on him? We called it shot spawn. So why don't we call it shot spawn on this object as well? That way we know exactly what it is and we're consistent. So we'll call this shot spawn. Make sure you press enter so that it takes. And now we're going to need a firing script, which is probably going to look suspiciously like the other one. So why don't we just look and see if we can use the exact same script within reason. So let's go back over to our warrior. And it's probably at the top level. And here's our, it's in the warrior controller script, so we probably don't want to reuse that one per se. We may want to, let's just see what's in here. We may want to split out the shooting part so that we can reuse. So we've got our logic fairly well mixed in here. And so we've got draw ray, we'll want to use that again. And then distance to target, that might come in handy, but we don't specifically need it because we're just going to let our players shoot to their heart's content, not wait until the enemy's in range. Although it might be cool to actually let them know when the target is in range. We might think about that later. Okay, so we do distance to target. Where do we actually shoot? We instantiate the shot here, and then it flies off in a direction. So I'm thinking, yeah, probably we're going to want to split this off and make it into a generic shooting script. So why don't we sort of build it with that in mind? Let's go back over here, and I'm going to make a new script, which we'll probably cannibalize here in a minute, but let's just build one thing at a time. So let's go back, and I'm going to put it on our rocket launcher. And I'll add a component. Go down to the bottom, select new script, and why don't we just call it generic artillery, since that's the name of our exercise. I think I'm spelling artillery right. If I'm not, well, it's a programming class, not an English class. Generic artillery sounds good to me. Okay. So we'll open this up. And let's see what we can use from the warrior controller script. So we know that we're going to use some of this. So we know we're going to use shot spawn, shot speed. And we know we're going to use this firing delay stuff. And we also know that we're going to need shot prefab. So why don't we grab as much of this as we can. I'm going to grab this little chunk here because it's all in one nice place. And I'll put it up here. And now I'm going to go back and grab the one thing that I couldn't get. And you know what? I think I'm going to turn off all the stuff that we don't need right now. Okay, now I'm going to go back and get the one thing I couldn't, which was the prefab spot. So I'll get that. And we'll put that in there as well. And so now we've got shot spawn as a transform, we've got our shot speed, we've got our prefab selection, and then we've got our firing delay variables. Let's go back to the warrior controller script, see what else we can pilfer. I like the draw array thing, so let's grab that. That's too much. Let me just do a Control C to copy it. And we'll put it here. And don't worry about that. We'll fix the errors here in just a moment. I guess we should grab the whole thing, right? Let's go ahead and just grab that. So now we have both of them. Usually the errors are caused by missing using statements, but in that case, that's not what it was. Okay, so we've got our array drawn so that we'll be able to tell which direction our shot go, and that's handy. And then the other part that we need is just this part right here, these two lines. And we'll put those in somewhere. Presumably somewhere in update. I'll go ahead and put them in here for now. Obviously that's not exactly what we want, but at least we have not typed any new code in at this stage. And so we're okay. The question becomes, how much of this can we really reuse? So we've copied a lot of stuff, and usually anytime you're copying code, you need to start thinking about reusing. But I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get this working, and then we're going to worry about reusing. And that's usually how I do it. I get everything, and then I go back and refactor. Remember, refactoring means that we're going to go back and look and see if we can make anything more streamlined, easier to read, easier to maintain, faster, anything like that. But we're not adding new functionality. The functionality isn't changing, just the code, and hopefully the code is improving somehow. So let's get it working. That's always job number one. And so all I really need to do to get this working is some indication of a shot being fired under control of the user. And I think I pull another trick that I pulled in the last set of videos, I guess not the last one, but the one before that when we were talking about clamping. I'm going to steal again from the script that we made in the advanced class on the tanks, because the tanks, they actually have this nice little snippet right here that I can use. And so I'm going to use it. And one of the things that I like to do is I have an account on Bitbucket, which is essentially it's the same thing as GitHub, except it allows much more private account privileges, I guess you could say. I don't work on open source projects. I like getting paid for my work. And as such, I don't typically make open source projects. I make what are, I guess you'd call, closed source projects. I don't share my code with the whole world openly. I do some. There are some projects that I've put out there as open source. But by and large, most of my stuff is private. And so I like Bitbucket because it allows me to create private repository at no charge. Whereas GitHub only allows you to create open source projects free of charge. If you want to do closed source projects, you have to pay for them. Bitbucket, that's not so. You don't have to pay, and you get all of the closed repositories that you want. You can make them open or closed as much as you want to. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is that you've no doubt noticed that we use these little pieces of code over and over again, and a new feature on Bitbucket that I really like is this snippets feature. So I'm logged into my Bitbucket account. You can see all of these projects that I have, and I can click on snippets, and I can make different little pieces of code that I'm going to use over and over again. So in my professional work, I do a lot of work with Sync Fusion charts, and this is how you make a Sync Fusion chart. So I can just come in here and get this. Now, if this is a new feature, that's why there's only 2 things in here. But you might notice I've already put turret control in here. That's the script we wrote 2 videos back. And I can click on that, and I can come in here, and I can use my own code snippets from days gone by. You also have the ability to make these public or private. I always make these public because I don't feel the need that I have to share an entire project with the whole world. I'm certainly not going to let some stranger contribute to a game that I didn't mean to be open source. But I also like teaching, obviously, and so I don't mind offering up little pieces of code like this that people can use in their games. Use it however you like. And so that's a great way, I think, a great way to give back without necessarily having to make all of your work open source. All right, so I'm showing you that just because my point was that I borrow a lot from my other projects. So I've got this other project going on, and I think once I finish Tank Controller and all of these parts and we get them working the way they should be, then I'll probably take the final scripts and put them into my Bitbucket snippets repository. And the other nice thing about doing it this way is that it is on the web rather than on a specific computer. I use 2 or 3 different computers pretty regularly. I have a work computer, I have my Mac, I have computers at school, I have a few utility computers around the house and in labs, and it's nice that it's not dependent on a particular machine where I can get to my code, and if I want to show you something, I can just go to the web and do it. So that's another neat plus in, I think, Bitbucket's favor. Maybe you can do that in GitHub as well. I think you can now that I think about it, and that's probably why you can do it here. They're competitors with one another, but I don't use GitHub for the aforementioned reasons, and so I can't really comment on what you can and can't do there. But come to think of it, they do have snippets, and I think they're called, oh, I can't remember what they're called. Let me see. Oh, it's a gist. That's what it is. It's built into some of my tools. There's a create gist in here somewhere. Yeah, that's all right. You get the idea. All right. So we just need this firing code in here. Let me get back off of my little tangent, or was it an arc tangent? I'm not sure. And we're going to reuse this get key code spacebar thing, and we'll put it in here. And we're not going to do command fire. We will put it in here, like so. And now we've essentially got our shot going on. Now, I don't think we have this set up for the delay thing. So let me go back and look and see what we have over here for the delay thing. We have this distance to target, weapons range, and time greater than next. Okay, so we need that. We need that part. So let's grab that. And there's 2 ways to go about this. I'm going to nest my ifs because I think that's more readable in this case. I'm going to say if time is greater than the next firing time. Incidentally, if you're asking what's the other way to do it, it would have been to make a compound if statement up here. I may go back and refactor that here in a minute, but for now, it seems like this is easier to read, although it's less compact. And then now that we've got our time and our next fire time setup, we need to go ahead and increment next fire time. Let's find that in our warrior control script. And we're saying if distance to target, weapons range, and next fire timer, good to go. Then here's where we're actually setting it. A neat feature, if you haven't noticed this in Visual Studio, is when you highlight a variable, it goes ahead and highlights all the other instances of the variable in that script. And so that makes things easy to see. And so that was a good clue that I needed that one right there as well. So let's take this in, and we'll put this in here as well. And now I think we are complete. Let's think it through. So we've got if, key down, spacebar. It's going to check to see if the time is right. And if it is, then it's going to go ahead and set the next fire time. It's going to instantiate the shot, set that in a variable, and then we're going to get the rigid body, and then we're going to make that shot go forward. So that looks pretty good. And let's see if it works. Remember, we're focusing on whether or not it works at this stage. So I'm going to run this. And the first thing I'm going to look for, really, is to see where my little green line is, if I can. And I don't see it yet. So let me see. Oh, we haven't set any of the, that's why it's not working. So we haven't set any of the prefabs. Shame on us. Okay, so here's our artillery script, and I didn't set shot spawn and I didn't set shot prefab, so that's why it's freaking out. So we need shot spawn on there. So here is our shot spawn. We're going to drag it and drop it to that spot. So let me do that. There we go. And then we want the shot prefab. And so I think it's this one that says, well, I guess we made a green one and a red one. Oh, it's bullet. Here we go. That's just a texture. That gets me every time because it looks like, oh, it's a sphere. No, that's a texture. It's just a color. All right, so bullet is what we really want. Let's select our rocket launcher again, and let's drag our bullet prefab on there. There we go. And hopefully we get a better result this time. And there's our line. Well, no, that's the line of the bad guy. I don't see our green line. Okay, what happens when we shoot? Nothing. Where's our console? Okay, we've got some noise in here. Let's clear that out. That's probably from the last script that we wrote. I'll double click it, and there it is from our last video. It's usually a good idea to get rid of those debug statements, especially anything in update, because those are going to be annoying as they are now. Let's see if we have anything appearing now when we fire. Okay, it looks like we fired, but it looks like it did something crazy. And it looks like they're shooting sideways. So I would hope that I wonder why my line is not showing. So we have some things to figure out. Let's start by trying to figure out why the line's not showing up. Let's go back into the code. It's clearly pointing the wrong direction anyway. Maybe 10 is not enough. Why don't we give it a nice big value like 100? And why don't we make it a different color just so that we know which one we're looking at? Why don't we make this one, how about a red? You really can't go wrong with red. Okay, so that's going to draw a 100-meter line. And hopefully now it will be more visible. We're definitely shooting sideways. But I definitely don't see that line. And I think I see my problem. I put this code in a different place. So let's go fix in the warrior script, we put it in the update, and in this one we put it in start. So it's probably drawing it for an instant, and we want it to draw it continuously. So that will probably make all the difference. Let's move it down into update and see if that fixes it. That's better. Okay, now we have something we can see, and it is definitely pointing the wrong direction. Okay, so we just want to rotate this by 90 degrees, and it should be 90 degrees in the positive. So let's click on shot spawn and see if rotating it in 90 degrees in the positive affects the change that we hope for. And now it looks like we're pointing the right way. That's pretty funny. I love the bounce. Okay, we're going to have to start angle so that we can actually hit this guy because he's further over than we have access to. So let's on our rocket launcher again, and let's change our limits. So we put this, remember when we built this, we decided that 37 was probably the way to go, but we used 30 because that was easy to check our math. So why don't we take it as high as 40 and see if we can get away with 40? Because that will be one we can actually hit, I think. So there he is. Otherwise, we're going to have to adjust our levels so that he doesn't come in at quite the angle that he does. Oh, but he's lining up nice. Let's can hit him. Oh. See, that looks pretty good. I ought to be able to shoot him right in the face. Oh, yeah, right in the face. I love it. Bam. Hey, we can actually shoot his shots, too. That's something I didn't think of. Okay. So pretty good. So that's our objective for this video, is to be able to shoot back. And so I guess next we will determine what happens when we actually hit each other. I think all we have right now is we tried to throw a message up there when the bad guy hits us. And do we have a collider? Well, we'll cover it in the next video. I'm getting ahead of myself.